Hi guys, welcome back to the Revive Stronger podcast. I'm your host, as always, Steve Hall, and today I have a very special guest, Mario Tomic. If you're an entrepreneur or a busy professional looking to get leaner, stronger, and happier, then you've probably already come across Mario's content. With over 430,000 subscribers on YouTube and 54 million views, Mario has spent the last 10 years coaching more than 950 clients, cutting through the usual fitness nonsense to promote a scientific approach to health and fitness. I first bumped into Mario in Bath in the UK about 10 years ago, where we were attending a evidence-based fitness seminar, essentially, with some of the big names who have been on the podcast too. And so to see him develop his brand and grow has been fantastic. So we actually dive into some of the most stressful times of Mario's life, where he is focused on maintaining muscle rather than growing it, and the importance of dedicating yourself fully to hypertrophy without spreading yourself too thin. Mario also shares his business and how that's evolved over time, what keeps him motivated to train despite not competing in physique sports, at least now. Mario also discusses the common reasons he sees people not getting results in fitness, and we introduce the concept of the upside versus downside paradigm. He emphasizes the importance of making small changes that add up over time rather than focusing on perfection at various time points. If you're looking for daily inspiration, Mario's philosophy is all about making healthy habits a natural part of your daily life until it feels strange not to do them, whether it be daily walks, eating well, or hitting the gym. A really fantastic chat with Mario that I think will resonate with a lot of you. As a reminder, guys, at Revive Stronger, we are an online coaching company. So if you're interested in dropping fat, getting more muscle, taking the bodybuilding stage, doing a photo shoot, getting into the best shape of your life, fitter, healthier, stronger, more jacked, that is what we help people do. With that, learn along the way, understand the scientific principles, how they apply to you, and overall just gain a ton of confidence to make you a better trainee, a better coach potentially. We work with a lot of coaches, and we do that through our online coaching platform that is very personal. We do video check-ins as opposed to just quick emails, and we have in-depth responses each week or every other week, depending on the coaching service that you require from us. And we take this stuff seriously. This is how we earn our living, and it's what I spend the majority of my day doing, as well as many of my team. So guys, if you're interested in that, it's always linked in the description. But without further ado, let's get into the chat with Mario. So Mario, I think I certainly first met you, and I think maybe the only time I've met you in person. I don't know if you'll remember the event. I'll spit it out. Bath, UK. It was James Krieger, Brad Schoenfeld, Alan Aragon, Brett Concheras, part of the Personal Trainer Collective, I think at the time it was, through Luke Johnson. And that's when Luke used to do quite regular seminars with some of these kind of big figureheads in the evidence-based space. Do you remember that time? Do you remember being in Bath?
I remember that seminar. It was a great seminar. It was actually the first time I met Alan and Brad in person. And same for, I think, James and, as you said, Brett as well. It was really cool to meet the guys in person, because when you follow someone's work for a long time, you read their papers, read their blog posts on social media, you kind of have some familiarity. But that was the time that I actually got them know as people. So it was like another layer of like, okay, this is awesome. Like, this is a really cool individual. And it was amazing. I mean, first saw you there, saw a couple of other people from social media. That was kind of interesting. Like, we're all there to learn. And that was awesome. I think we ran into each other once when we were traveling, I think Playa Carmen or something. That was like way back, like a couple of years later. But yeah, it was pretty cool, man. I remember that seminar, and that was a lot of learning there. It was, I think, Personal Training Collective. There was a group that was online. I did their certification at the time.
I think it was right after as well.
Exactly, yeah. So I think they did the seminar right after the certification. At least my cohort was done. I don't know what they do these days, if they still do those, but it was a great certification as well, because you got Mike Zordos, there was Eric Helms teaching most of the material and curriculum. So learned a lot from that one. It was my first like big intro into the evidence-based like material, and they really started from the basics all the way down to like the nitty-gritty. So yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, I'm kind of upset these seminars don't happen anymore, but the space has changed. Obviously, we've brought over Mike Israetel and Renaissance Periodization to the UK over the last number of years, but even now there's less opportunities to do that, because it's just not worth some people's time in the same way, because Mike can sit behind at his desk, go through all the information like a seminar and give it to millions. Now they've got millions of subscribers. But I do miss that one-on-one time in connection with like people in the industry like that. And I guess you've been traveling, so I don't know if you were able to kind of keep hold of some of that whilst you've been traveling.
It's tough because most of them are done in the US, so you can only stay in the US for so long. There was one really good seminar group that's organized in Norway. So I was traveling and I was staying in Latvia for a while. And then coincidentally, at the same time, there was this seminar in Oslo. It was organized by the Norwegian PT group. And again, that's where I reconnected with Brad Schoenfeld. It was a seminar where a lot of like people came. I think Nick Tuminello came out. He was a really interesting person to learn from. I haven't been exposed to Nick's work before at all. He just kind of brought a lot of new ideas to the table there that I haven't seen before. And a lot of his stuff comes from like PT experience of in-person work. And he just kind of shared some really cool stuff again, like meeting up with Alan and meeting up with some of the other guys there. Brett was also there. And yeah, just a lot of like really awesome experiences. And I think COVID was really the kind of the breaking point where a lot of people has got discouraged. And I think the Norwegians are not even organizing those anymore. And I was kind of, yeah, sad that it didn't happen because it was so well organized. It was all like in one hotel, and you just kind of get to hang out after the presentations are done as well. So just like really nice grabbing breakfast in the morning. Like you can just kind of, Eric was there as well, Eric Helms. So it was just really cool to just hang out in between as well. So yeah, it's a shame, man. Yeah, I need to catch up with you guys on one of your seminars in the UK because it's not so far to travel now from Lisbon. I don't travel as much anymore, but if it's just an hour or two flight, I mean, I think that's reasonable to check out some of that stuff.
Yeah, it's we were planning one during COVID to have. It was Alberto Nunez and Eric Helms against Jared Feather and Mike Isertel. This was when, I don't know if you saw it, Mike and Eric were kind of pit against each other in some circumstances, in some circles. People thought they kind of had some strong disagreements. And in some sense, they had some disagreements with programming, periodization, and had them on the podcast to debate some of that. But that all got shut down, and it's like New Zealand were not open for quite a while.
Yeah.
And so
yeah, far, yeah.
I think it's sense. Like you said, a lot of people got put off by it, and now it's just not happening as often, which it is a shame. But maybe we can kind of open things back up and do that. When we talk about when you were in Bath, what were you doing at that time? Were you already full-time kind of online coaching and doing social media, or was that kind of you doing something else?
That was kind of the start of it. I think, I mean, I started a little bit earlier than that, just with some basic stuff, but that was like the time that I was going through the certification. I was like 2015, 2016, as I recall. And 2016 was this like big travel plus building my business phase where I did a video every single day. So the time that the seminar in Bath was right before that. So that phase, when I finished the seminar, I went on to travel, and I just consistently started doing videos every single day for a whole year while traveling as well. And that grew my audience like to a pretty substantial amount. And yes, like that was sort of for me a decision. Okay, I'm going to go all in on the coaching stuff, because there was for me personal interest plus combining with a passion and a business idea. I kind of had how it all connects. And I found that also making videos was pretty rare at the time. Nobody else was really doing video content like today. I mean, you got a lot of people doing it. So I found that was kind of the niche that I really wanted to explore, and then it worked out. I mean, the audience grew over time, and as you kind of know yourself, like as you get more and more subscribers and people kind of know about you, there's a certain percentage of those that want to work with you directly. So it eventually sort of just became bigger and bigger. But yeah, like I would say that was one of the kind of key moments as well to, I guess, get some acknowledgement. Okay, you actually know a lot of stuff, and that you can actually help a lot of people. And when you connect with sort of like the researchers as well, you kind of have a layer of extra confidence that when you're just, I guess, by yourself, like when you're getting results in the gym is not the same as when you get, 50 clients, then you've also gotten a couple of certifications. Like you really feel like there's this baseline of I can get good work done now. And that was a good experience for me as well, to learn how to individualize programs more and just generally what's important, what's not important. So yeah, that was the time.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. When you first get into the space, there is this sense of imposter syndrome. And that it kind of sticks around for quite a while, because especially for us, we're surrounded by really smart individuals and we expose ourselves to that. And so you realize what you don't know. You kind of get the Dunning-Kruger effect out the way very quickly, and you're kind of in this zone of like, oh, wow, there's so much out there that I don't know, and these very incredible people. But when you have so much evidence, not just that you've got results yourself, but you've got so many clients' results, it's hard to be like, I don't know what I'm doing. It's like, well, clearly I do, because look at all these results that I've driven. And I think there's something incredibly invaluable about that experience. How's your kind of business evolved since then? Is it still mostly kind of one-on-one coaching, or have you kind of changed anything in that regard?
So we started with 101. So I was the only person I was doing pretty much everything, as most people kind of starting a solo entrepreneur journey. I was never even, I didn't even have an idea of how I'm going to hire people or what I'm going to do, how I'm going to scale this thing. I just started, I'm going to coach and I'm going to build an audience, and let's see how it goes. The audience building was going really well. So eventually, when you get to a certain amount of clients, so you have to start looking for assistants. You have to start eventually looking for coaches. So now, yeah, I do have a team in the back end that's helping out. Like, I'm still involved in coaching because I like coaching. I oversee the programs. I meet with the team all the time. Like, I'm still involved with a lot of clients as well directly myself. Like, that's just something I like to do. And as a content creator, it also helps me kind of feed the model. Like, I kind of understand what is going on, and I'm not disconnected from the audience, which I feel like a lot of content creators who've never coached have a problem with relating to the end user of what they're going through, especially when you've done 15 fat loss phases and you kind of know it in and out, and you're dealing with someone who's doing it for the first time. Like, you lose that connection. Okay, how it felt like, you lose that empathy. And as a coach, empathy and being able to put yourself in a position of the other person, of the struggle that they're going to go through, is really critical. So I found that as a content creator, having some coaching still going on is really helpful. I do weekly meetings with all the clients. Like, I do a lot of stuff where people are still even challenging my own ideas, because people are consistently questioning you. People are watching, Dr. Mike. They're going to be watching other people. Like, they're reading research. Even now, I found that a lot of clients are a lot nerdier than they were back in, let's say, circa 2015, 2016, because there's, a lot of guys like Jeff Nipper. There's like people posting research studies. Also, people are reading more research, and it's kind of cool. Like, clients are coming in with a certain amount of knowledge that you're there to kind of break down and turn into a mental model and a framework they can apply, what works for them, what doesn't. So coaching is really fun, man. Like, I know people, I know you can make more money selling supplements. I know you can do a lot more with, apps and stuff. And there might be some stuff like that I might do in the future. But I like what we have now. And it's kind of hard to hard to switch from something that works. And it's also something that, fits all the other goals. And yes, it's not as big of a scale. So I don't know, like, there's a lot of clients of mine, because I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, are like, scale, 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 scale. Mario, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? And I don't know, like, I'm more of, I guess, conservative in that aspect. Like, I'm not looking to be the biggest and like the largest company in the world in this. So I don't know. It's just a different mentality, I guess, a different approach. I like lean teams, I like small teams, like smaller businesses where it's still kind of like, everybody. Where after you go, I'd say above, I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, say above 30 people, above 40 people in the company, it's just, you have to introduce managers, and you just lose track of what everybody's doing. Once you get to 100, 150, it's just, you have no idea what's going on. So you have to have managers report to you, and then you're sort of like disconnected one layer from what's going on. So I don't know, it's just different approaches. So I guess that what I found out works really well. So how long we're going to keep doing it, I don't see like a big change anytime soon, but yeah, there's always potential to add stuff to the business. You can always add layers onto coaching, because I think coaching is a great foundation. One of my clients, who's a doctor, just recently said, it's kind of something interesting. When we were talking, he said, Mario, you have really good pattern recognition, because he said that's what happens after you've done something for a long time, because he's, as a doctor now, has 25 years of experience looking at scans, results, different symptoms and things. Instead, your mind has just recognized so many things over the years, and you have these reference experiences, so you can recognize patterns really quickly, same as he can do in his work. So I'm sure you feel the same. Like, you kind of just get it once you see a certain case scenario, and you see a lot of data coming from a person, like, you're getting at what should be the next logical step. And I think that's really valuable. Like, it's kind of hard to get to that point without coaching. At this point, at least, I don't think we have enough research or any. It's just a starting point at this point, research.
So well said. I can think back to some of my first check-ins a decade ago, similar to you. And it's just like a check-in would take me like an hour with a client. It's like, It was like a 5-minute video from them. And I'm like, like trying to figure out everything. Whereas now it's just like connecting the dots is so quick. Cause it's like, this happened. Okay, quite clearly it's this. And it makes me think of, I think it's like chess players, like very good chess players can think like
Yeah.
3 steps ahead versus their opponent, because they can just work that out. And it's kind of like that. We can kind of, and you've probably had it said to you with your clients where they're like, oh, you're a magician, because somehow we could see into the future. Like we knew this. They're like, oh, my scale weight hasn't come down. And we're just like, yeah, it's probably going to come down this next week. Keep everything the same. And then it comes down. It's like, we're not a magician. It's just, we've seen this so many times, and that experience is invaluable. You're so true and so right. And also I respect your decision not to necessarily go down certain paths, because I think that's assumed by a lot of like business people. Like you just think, oh, I always have to be earning more, being bigger, whatever it is. But it's like, well, once you found what you love and then you can kind of maintain that, maybe you'll actually enjoy life more by just holding on to this level. And then also, I know, like for me, I think to get to that like next step, maybe to where you are or further beyond, like the amount of time and effort and also money that has to go into that to then pay off in the long run. Like it's like, what's the trade-off there? If I could just kind of hold what is like a great standard of living, I really enjoy what I do. And then if I've got like extra time because I'm not like too focused on the business, I can put it into, I don't know, gaming as we're talking off air and I don't know, get some more joy out of life type of thing.
Yeah, I think more people are waking up to that idea of that it doesn't have to be this, 8-figure, 9-figure company in order for you to be happy. It's kind of interesting. Like if you look at what it boils down to, like if you're hanging out with the people you want to hang out with, if you have a certain living standard, if you're healthy, and if you're not making any major mistakes in life, like you're going to be pretty happy. Like if you're not just really screwing up something bad, like you're going to be okay. And then from there, like, yes, you can grow. And I love to see the channel numbers go up. I love to see the number of clients go up. I like the continuous improvement of it, but it's not a necessity as much as it is just me loving the process and the mastery of it. It's kind of the same probably after, I mean, I don't know how long you've been lifting, but I've been lifting now for 15 years. It's kind of similar to that point. Like I know there's gains to be made, but the question is, do I want to add a 6th session to get extra volume that week? Or do I want to spend the weekend with my daughter? Right. Like it's kind of, for that extra pound of muscle a year, like, is it really worth it to that point? Because I'm already good. Because once you reach your physique, at least from my perspective, like I reached the physique that I'm really happy with, that I never even thought I would have. So at this point, everything else beyond that is a bonus, and I don't plan on competing. And honestly, like that, there's no massive amounts of pressure for me to like make huge sacrifices in my life quality or just the amount of time that's invested. So people kind of ask me like, do you consider yourself a bodybuilder? Yes or no. Like I wouldn't necessarily even say, because I think there are a lot more people willing to sacrifice a lot more for bodybuilding than I am. I'm willing to sacrifice up until a certain point, but I've gotten sort of at the point where diminishing returns are so obvious that I'm hesitant to pour in like 100 hours more time into it to get maybe like a 2% improvement on the rate of growth, where it's already kind of still going. So it's fine. Right. And it's kind of a hard decision, man, because I love spending time in the gym. Like it's like my temple. Like I live there, and I lived there for 15 years, and I've had phases where I trained, full body every day for 2.5 hours and just do all this like amazing stuff. Go beast mode in the gym, like go really hard and take like a bunch of pre-workouts. But yeah, it's just at this point, like you have to weigh the balance between that real life commitments with your family, with your friends. I try to really spend like more time with my dad, mom, travel, like do all kinds of stuff that I guess I missed out to some extent when I was just focusing on grinding out the business, because every business you kind of have these, I don't know, 5 to 10 dark years. And that's kind of where I came from as well. Like I had pretty much nothing, and I was nobody from like a random country. And eventually, 5 years later, I have a business that I can support myself, my family, and everybody. So those 5 years of grinding, they come at like with some scars, I guess. So you don't necessarily want to continue grinding. Like you realize, okay, I can work smarter now. I don't have to necessarily just pour in hours. I can try to be a little bit smarter. But obviously that works only so far in bodybuilding, because it's you gotta do extremely large amounts of work and smart work in order to continue that progression. So yeah, I think that's kind of where it's at with the business at the moment. Like I like the growth, and I think we can improve a lot, but yeah, I wouldn't want to, let's say, launch something I'm not considering ethical, like, or, no offense to anybody, but I wouldn't want to launch an energy drink or like a supplement or like a pre-workout. Like I just don't believe in those products. Like that's just not something I would, even if it would make me a lot more money, I don't see the point at the moment.
I think that analogy to your physique is a great example, actually, and kind of discussing the opportunity costs of things. I often think about it with bodybuilding, and sometimes I wonder if the kind of sacrifice, I don't like the word sacrifice, although it kind of is true, but it's almost like, is it a sacrifice if you're choosing to do it and it's what you want
Yeah.
to do? It's kind of like, well, it's just a choice. But I would say I'm still at that point. I'm a competitive bodybuilder. I'm kind of trying to turn pro. And it's like, I do definitely go right into those diminishing returns of training more than what is probably like, hey, I could train way less and still see some results, but I want to try and maximize that. But I don't do that with my business. And I think you kind of have to pick and choose your battles a little bit. You can't kind of go 100% into everything. Otherwise, you're just like burn out really, really quickly. So now you
Yeah.
with family, like it makes complete sense. Like if I had a child, I would not be able to be as selfish to put that much time into these various aspects, and I'd have to really manage things and kind of manage my expectations in that regard too. So it's interesting you brought up not competing, because I was going to ask you actually, Mario, if you'd ever contemplated competing. I know you've done multiple like photo shoots and things, but you've never
Yes.
wanted to take it to the stage. I'd love to hear kind of if you've considered it and what made you decide not for me.
In 2016, I considered it. 2017, I considered it. And at the time, I was traveling. So it added another little complication, but I still consider it because I got extremely shredded at a couple of points. And I was like, okay, this is already okay to compete. I was even looking at some fitness model or physique competitive shows. They're not bodybuilding shows, they're more like physique oriented. So it kind of fits better my physique at the time. So, yeah, I mean, there was that idea. It kind of, you know, business took priority actually at the time. So business destroyed that idea because I also felt like when I was that shredded, and when I was, let's say, walking around 7-8% body fat, which is fantastic for photos, you get them done and you move on. But that prep, it just kills you mentally. It kills your energy. It kills, like, a lot of business was just really suffering. I couldn't even continue creating content at the level that I wanted. I was just tired all the time. I would create a video and I'm wiped out for the whole day. And that's just that, low calorie intake life that you live it for, 3, 4, 6 months, depending on how lean you are. And I guess I never even felt like my physique was extremely competitive. So I know you shouldn't think like that. Obviously, like, you're competing against yourself in a way. You're trying to put the best package out there and try to beat that. But I was kind of looking at the guys, and that's the problem with social media in a sense. Like now, maybe back 100 years ago, I'd be maybe comparing myself to my neighbor or someone in a local environment in a local city. Now on Instagram, I'm comparing myself to Chris Bumstead, right? Like I'm comparing myself to the top, 0.1% of the entire planet, where maybe 100 years ago, we would have only compared ourselves to maybe some, couple of local stuff, right? So that's one of the reasons why I never really pulled the trigger on that, because business took over. Now, whether I'm going to do it, I think ideal time for me is a kind of like I would have to outlive a lot of people's peaks to then try to compete with them, maybe in in late 40s or 50s as a master. I feel like that would be really cool. Like I would want to show up with a really solid package in 50 and 60, because I don't mind the long term game. And that would be kind of cool to just show up and, in my, kids, family, like everybody's kind of at a stage where they can tolerate me being, more focused on myself. I think that would be cool, because when you're in your 30s, now I'm 37, let's say to some extent in your 40s, you have the responsibilities for essentially two generations. Like, you're responsible for your parents, you're also responsible for your own kids, and you're also responsible for building a base of a life that's going to support literally everybody around you, right? So you're the person taking charge, and you're responsible for everything essentially. And competing, I think, would be at this point, with all the things that I've already kind of invested in and took responsibilities on myself, would be just a distraction on that for practically no gain. So yeah, I think 50 plus, or at the point like 60 plus, would be ideal to compete. And then I think I would probably even be competitive, because I don't, injure myself. I don't do anything too crazy, and I'm slowly building muscle. So the package would probably be impressive compared to the rest, because a lot of the guys that are competing now, like, I see in their 50s and 60s, are insanely impressive. So I think that that would be a really good way to go with, like, 40 years of training experience. I mean, then you show up and yeah, just like a little put something on stage and just be proud of that. I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, I totally respect your decision there of kind of not taking it to that level of competition, because I think a lot of people underestimate how much it does take from you. Because, like you said, being that lean, like when you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like you're just focused on like the absolute bare essentials, and you don't have any bandwidth for any extra curriculum or curriculum activities. And so building a business, I mean, some people say it's good for business to compete, which I can see why they might think that, but ultimately the energy that you have is not there to drive it. So unless you're very lucky and fortunate that you have, I don't know, videographers and people that can take photos and do your social media for you, essentially most of us have to do that ourselves. So it becomes really challenging. And so I totally respect that, hey, you had bigger fish to fry essentially to get done. But the cool thing with natural bodybuilding is we can kind of hold, I'm interested to see how it goes, but I think theoretically we can hold kind of a peak natural physique that we might hit our peak at, I don't know, 40 years old or something, and then maintain that for, I don't know, 5, 10, a number of years. So like as a masters, you should be hopefully still at your peak. And then that's a nice thing to kind of consider, is that
I'd love
you're,
that,
you're not competing when you've already dropped down.
Yeah,
you know?
man, that's awesome. And people underestimate the difference between being shredded or what they see in my photo when I'm, let's say, 10 or 8% body fat versus going on stage. That's another like 2-3 months of like really insane dieting. And that, I don't think people understand just the difference between competitive and just being lean. It's just insane. Like it's a huge difference. We're not talking, I mean, and I already feel like crap when I'm super shredded. And then I would imagine just taking one level above that would be nuts. I remember testing my testosterone back in, it was like 2017. I got very, very lean. It was like 125, like 130 nanograms per, I think, deciliter. I think whatever the metric is. So anyways, like the normal one was like 250, and I was like half the normal, like bottom, like entry. So I was nowhere even near normal. And I wouldn't say it really tanked my mood or whatever. I mean, it just pretty much being hungry all the time was the biggest problem. But yes, like there's no libido, there's all these like negative consequences, poor sleep. If I had a baby at the time, I mean, I honestly don't know what I would have done. Like it would just, I would have just started eating. I just wouldn't have kept it. But at the time, I didn't have as many responsibilities as I have today to my team as well as to my family. Like it's just, at some point, again, you have to weigh the pros and cons, but I love the idea of stepping on stage in 50 plus. Like, I just really like that idea, because that's just for a natural, like that's just what you're working toward in a sense. That's in a way why you're choosing to stay natural, is because of that longevity and that physique, and that you don't sacrifice your health, and you're actually gaining all the benefits from fitness and health. And I'm interested in very much in longevity and healthy aging and functional aging, and seeing, and I do have clients now who are in their 60s and 70s who are really in amazing shape, very lean. You wouldn't even, based on their weight, you wouldn't tell how jacked they are, but when you look at their photos, they're just insanely jacked. Like you have guys 5'10", 145, 150 pounds, they're just jacked as hell, very lean. They're not walking around 200 pounds, obviously, but like, again, that's another delusion on social media where all these numbers are thrown around from people wearing hands. So I love the idea of kind of stepping on stage, as there's probably going to be a lot of us at that time, because now there's not as many people 60 plus competing. I'd imagine because millennials are sort of, I'm millennium, like 87. So our generation is so much into fitness. There's going to be a lot of us trying to, and it's probably going to be more competitive, and it's going to be more fun because it's all going to be kind of laid back as well. Like you're hanging out with people. It's just a really fun way to kind of spend your 60s and 70s, like competing and kind of having fun with fitness. I mean, that's really cool.
It's also an added incentive to keep it all going. Although by that point, it's so much like brushing our teeth that we're not going to let it go. But that's something I've also been reflecting on. It must be something to do with getting into your 30s, where you think about health more, longevity more, because a lot of the illnesses are just related to being older and more beat up and having gone through life. And I'm so thankful for younger Steve, who stayed natural and did lots of behaviors that weren't healthy for a period of time. But in general, the last decade plus has been like very healthy living thanks to natural bodybuilding. And I was doing it for the selfish endeavor of trying to just get more jacked. But now I look at it and I'm like, hey, not only was I getting more jacked, I was also setting myself up for a healthier and longer life. And so it's really nice kind of looking back at that. And it makes me, and I'm sure you're the same, want to try and like communicate that to the younger people who maybe aren't aware of it, where it's like, hey, we've been there, done that. we're now well set up. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, you mentioned social media. It's becoming very commonplace to talk about kind of drug protocols, and you see teenagers jumping on gear, and it's just like, for me, I was just so ignorant to all of that when I was in the gym, and it just wasn't even a question. Whereas
Same.
now it's, unless, I think back then for us, it was if there was someone in your gym who was talking to you about it, and like maybe you'd get into a group and you'd end up taking something. I think that could happen. Whereas now it's like, hey, social media is like now your new environment, you're exposed to all of it. And so it's just becoming so more abundant. And yeah, I don't know if that brings any thoughts to your head in terms of the
there's
growth of
pressure
that.
to make it. That's the problem now. The pressure is to make it on social media. Back when I started lifting, there was no social media. There was no pressure to make it on social media. You were not real. That wasn't a career path, at least when I started lifting. So there was, for me, lifting was more for myself, and it really didn't even make sense to take drugs, or there was no people around me that were taking drugs, and everybody was just kind of having fun with it, lifting, and they were not even as serious. I was probably the most serious person in my gym for a very long time in Croatia when I was training initially. I mean, there's two friends of mine. One was a really competitive sprinter. He went into lifting and he got actually very jacked and competitive eventually and all that. But I was like one of the most serious people there. I was the only one reading books, getting into this stuff. I was really trying to crack the code. And I felt like that gave me the edge early on to get as much out of those newbie gains and trying to get results as quickly as possible. But yeah, like the social media idea or the idea of getting jacked or peer pressured into taking stuff, like it just didn't exist. And yes, like the issue is we don't listen to people that are even a couple of years ahead of us. Like nobody's gonna value, or unfortunately, they don't value the opinion of someone who kind of says, "Look, I've been there and done that." It doesn't fly when you're just that young. And unfortunately, even just discussions of drugs are normalizing, and it's kind of creating that availability bias when more people are talking about it, and it kind of gets this illusion that everybody's on it, when reality is it's a small percentage of people who are taking. And even out of those people who are taking, a smaller percentage is actually responding well. And then the rest are having these insane negative consequences of that. So yeah, the availability bias is really messing people up here. The other part is that, people are, as a young person, you feel like you're indestructible. You've never really had any real issues with your health, and people don't understand how quickly that can change. If you just mess yourself up, like you're potentially sacrificing like quite a bit of life quality and long-term consequences of that, especially now. I mean, get kids on TRT in their like mid-20s, which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, this is just not, that's not supposed to be happening. And obviously there's a big push as well from advertisement and whatnot. I mean, we see it all the time on social media being pushed from clinics who are looking for lifetime subscribers. And obviously TRTs are fantastic business model. Like you just get hooked and you're basically on. Whereas again, most people will quit in like 7, 8 months due to side effects. And you look at all the data on people quitting and giving up, but nobody talks about that. It's kind of like when I love the analogy in marketing products. Like you buy a marketing product, and when they do the testimonial shooting, they do it literally like a day after someone's graduated or during the program. But I don't find that same person a year later and ask them, okay, did you actually do the work, and did it actually work for you? And did you get the results that you were in here for? It's same with TRT. If you, let's say you blast a higher dose, a week later, testimonial, fantastic. I feel fantastic. But where is that person a year later? Where's that person 6 months later, right? So it's not necessarily even the testimonial, it's the time that you're taking the testimonial. And in our business, I love to take like multiple testimonials. I sometimes reach out to guys that I worked like 3 years ago and, hey, can you give me an update to see where you're at? And I love seeing that long-term success. And I think that's sort of always the battle between instant gratification and sort of delayed gratification. And in TRT, it's kind of the same thing there. I think there's not enough stories of people who've been on who've quit. There's a lot of shame with that. There's a lot of sort of, nobody wants to put themselves out there and here's how I destroyed my health or my physique or whatnot. Yeah, so we're just getting the best case scenario. You're going to get a selection bias, survivability bias, like availability bias. It's just all the kind of crap is stacked against you as a young person looking at this. And I'm glad that there's yourself. I would say uh, Leonidas Alpha Destiny is really good. He's really amazing as a content creator who puts out what's naturally achievable. Jeffrey Verdi Schofield as well. Like I love the 3DMJ guys. Just a lot of there's a lot of people now that you can't deny the results that you can achieve naturally. Like there are people out there actually getting it done and achieving results. So I think as a movement, in a sense, like we're getting better, but again, we're just very small fish in a big sea compared to, again, big names like Chris Bumsteads of the world and all the other guys who have millions and millions of followers and reach that we are not able to get yet. And people would sometimes subscribe that to steroids, and maybe there's some of that going on there, but it's also that movement of bodybuilders and enhanced bodybuilders has always been bigger and older, and there's just a lot more interest in that compared to ourselves. Like there's just not many like natural competitors, like where natural competitions are not getting as much attention. So I think that there's some sense of pride in for me to be natural. I'm not sure if that's the same for you, but I'm really proud of to say that to people. And I guess being accused as a fake natural is also kind of nice because in a sense, like it validates that what you're doing is working. So yeah, like I really am concerned. I mean, I'm optimistic about the future, but I am concerned about the present and what
Yeah.
kids are doing nowadays.
Do you not see the progress you would like? Are you sick of writing your own programs? Or perhaps you need some accountability in order to stick with a plan? Then it's time to start working with us. We at Revive Stronger offer a truly personalized coaching service. You'll get more than just an email with some macros or random cookie cutter program. With Revive Stronger, you will be the center of our attention. You will receive your own fully individualized training protocol alongside a customized nutritional strategy. We created the coaching around your needs, wants, personal preferences, and your own unique lifestyle. Every single week, we delve into your program in order to make appropriate adjustments so that we get the most out of your time and the best possible outcome. We help both female and male athletes to seriously change their body composition by adding more muscle mass and decreasing fat tissue. Additionally, you get access to our exclusive Revive Stronger member site, where you'll be able to watch over hundreds of hours worth of educational content. No matter if you're a competitive bodybuilder or just want to look better, if you need help with your progress and taking your physique to the next level, our coaching is for you. It's time to make a change. Sign up today and let's revive stronger.
Yeah, I always think of the example of people are just attracted to extremes. So like race cars, we like watching like very fast cars go around a track. But if it was just like a Ford Toyota, or whatever, a Ford Fiesta, just going around the track at like a pretty fast pace for a Ford Fiesta, you'd be like, yeah, I mean, that's cool, like props. But it's kind of like a natural bodybuilder versus like a supernatural, like, oh, that's something freaky. That's kind of obscene. But again, it's like you said, people look at it with rose-tinted spectacles. And I've done it at times where I'm just like, oh man, look at these guys. They're so jacked. Like maybe I'll think about it. And then I'm like, think about all the negatives associated with that. And it's funny also getting accused. I think once you've done natural bodybuilding properly for like a decade, you're going to get people start accusing you.
Yeah.
Because they think that you did that in half the time or in a couple of years, or they can't even think 10 years in the future because natural bodybuilding is delayed gratification personified, exactly that. So the kids now want that 10 years in months, which they could maybe do if they respond well and they take enough, get that. But it's like, how many years are you taking away at the end of your life to have got like to shortcut that? And so I always come back to like, just enjoy the process. Like love that. And I always think like people are like, why do you stay natural and don't go enhanced? I often just think, well, the natural journey gives me everything that the enhanced journey would, but I don't look as big and muscular, but I also don't have all those negative health consequences. So I'm like, that trade-off is worth it to me in that sense. Like I get the progression, I get the kind of enjoyment of going to the gym and bettering myself. So it became an easy decision for me that way.
Yeah, and here's another way I look at it. So in fitness, there are steroids, right? You can take anabolics and they're probably going to give you a shortcut. In business, there is no such thing. In relationships, there is no such thing. In spirituality and mindset, there is no such thing. So you're essentially screwing yourself over because you're getting like feedback that something like that is possible, when in fact, like the rest of your life is going to get screwed over because there is no such thing. So if you don't master delayed gratification, you're going to be screwed anyway in life. So whether you're going to get a great physique or not, whether your bicep is going to be bigger or not, your psychology is going to be altered in a way that you're expecting things. Not necessarily everybody, but it does put you at a risk of now, okay, I've been able to achieve this and there is a shortcut. And I see a lot of people try to get the same shortcut working in other areas of life. And unfortunately, there is no such thing. So fitness is kind of one of those rare examples. Like, okay, there is actually a shortcut. I mean, again, there's no solutions in life, only trade-offs, right? So you are paying a price for it. But in many other domains, there is no such thing. Like you cannot stare at yourself to be a better dad. Like it's literally a continuous day-to-day process for the rest of your life, as long as you're alive. It's like an infinite game. There's no winning or losing. Like you just have to keep playing it and getting better at it. The same thing is in business. There is no such thing as winning business. I mean, yeah, there's an exit, you can retire, whatnot, but it's like you're either getting better or you're getting worse. Like it's a continuous effort. And that's, I think, in fitness the same. I mean, you can get as jacked as hell, but you still have to keep doing it. Otherwise, you're going to lose it. So it's use it or lose it. And I think when it comes to those types of things, I always kind of felt like you almost like do it for the sense of like a mental challenge, not necessarily just for the physical challenge. I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody, but I always felt like the psychology of us humans is fighting against this innate laziness that we all have, this tendency to do less, tendency to conserve energy, to try to like just be generally weaker, and whatever you don't use you lose, and that mentality is always kind of driving me. I gotta do more, I'm gonna push more. Yeah, so anything that kind of is easy and comfortable, I almost like have a negative bias toward it. That's probably not good for you, right? So maybe that's the same, but skewing my judgment here with drugs and whatnot. So I'm sure there's a middle ground, but again, that's at least my thought on it.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And I always think about the positives that bodybuilding, especially obviously natural bodybuilding, and the skill sets and everything it develops for other areas of life. Obviously, someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'm sure he was successful as a bodybuilder and then successful in government, business, as an actor, because it ingrained the same sort of habits and behaviors. So like you said, it doesn't apply to everyone, but especially a younger generation jumping on maybe much sooner than they should, it doesn't really develop some of those positive behaviors and habits that you get from the natural side of things. So I completely respect that.
Yeah, there's one Arnold in the history of human kind. There's one Arnold. So for every Arnold, there's literally millions of people who failed, like tens of millions who failed, who try to do the same thing, right? So that's the thing that we miss on social media. It's that exact selection and survivorship bias.
Yeah, very well said. Something I did want to draw back to actually was, you obviously mentioned that sometimes you make decisions where like that diminishing return isn't worth it to me, but you've spoken about it where you've had stressful times in your life. I think this was a YouTube video that I found where you maybe only maintained muscle, but you still dedicated a lot of your training towards hypertrophy. You talked about kind of not being fragile in those moments. So I'd love to hear a little bit about kind of your mindset going into your training during those stressful times, and how you make sure not to allow yourself to kind of fall backwards.
Yeah, and like that's the kind of, it goes back to the example that we just said, where at some point the best you can possibly do is maintain. I kind of see it as, you're the Sisyphus pushing a boulder up the hill, and at some point there's going to be a storm, there's going to be a lot of rain, there's going to be a lot of wind, and you won't be able to push the boulder any further, and you're just gonna, if you try to push it, it's going to roll back on you and it's going to set you back massively. So the best thing you can do at that time is find a strategy to hold the boulder in one place. Just go through the storm, weather the storm. Once the storm is over, continue pushing forward. And that's sort of the mentality that often are not cut when I talk to clients as well. Like once you're going on a 2-week trip to Marbella, right? Let's just keep the boulder in one place. Like, let's not try to do anything too crazy now. Let's maintain and let's resume. And because it can be non-linear, there's nothing wrong with things not being linear. And the same thing with my own training. Like I found, like, for example, when Mia was born, 5 hours of sleep, you're stressed out around the hospital, like, everybody's, there's a lot of recovery, a lot of sort of youth moments. You're waking up every 5 minutes to check if she's breathing. Like, you're just paranoid all the time. And yeah, I mean, there's those moments. My bench went from, 3 plates for 5 down to 3 plates for 2 reps. And I was kind of okay, like, screw it, man. Like, it's going to happen. And eventually I recovered and I could. So there's a lot of things like, strength levels are going down. And look, the way I see it, whether you're okay with it or not, you're going to regress at some point. Like, whether you accept it or not, you're going to have the period of regression. So the question is just your attitude toward that. My attitude was acceptance and try to make the most out of it, because I don't want to turn it into an excuse where I'm letting my mentality, diminish, and now me doing less work. So I think what we can always look back is just the level of effort. I know if I did my 10 out of 10 effort, one day that's going to result in a PR, some days that's going to result in a normal maintenance, and some days going to be regression. And that's perfectly fine. As long as it still goes back to training periodization, if it informs your decisions, hey, maybe I've got beat up, maybe I can change some variables here. And I did actually experiment with a low volume approach when she was born, and that actually worked out quite well. Some things like that, like you can still address it. I find like as long as you're addressing an issue, stress is immediately like 80% lower. As long as I'm just addressing things, I don't necessarily have to have a solution. As long as I'm like working toward a solution, that's already enough for me to diminish that stress level, for me not to worry as much, because I'm doing something about it. As weird as that sounds, I don't claim that I have the solution, but at least that helps. But yeah, there's plenty of times in life, especially when you're traveling, like where you sort of have to accept I might not be able to make the most progress here. If I try to go to the gym and let's say I'm squatting 4 plates and I'm traveling and I got a weird seat at the airplane where my legs were kind of locked into place, or 2 big guys next to me and I just can't move. I'm pretty beat up. I get a leg session the next day. I go in there, everything hurts. So yes, I can try to warm up and get to those. And sometimes I will get my volume done that I should be, but a lot of the times things are just going to hurt. And you just got to back off and just say, screw it. I mean, that's just how it is today. So I think traveling really taught me a lot about, what it takes to, the humbleness of having to take a step back. And I did get hurt multiple times, like being stupid. And obviously in my younger years, jumping from an airplane, landing in a city the same day, I'm going to go and do Bulgarian split squats, 2 plates on each side. I'm going to just, barbell Bulgarian split squat for sets of 10 at a, 9 RP. And then you get, a hip injury and an MRI, and I destroyed my hip in 2020 like that, just because 2022 like that, just because of that mistake. In 2020, I had an issue with my elbow. So I did make a lot of stupid decisions. So I've learned, I guess, over time is you have to really honor it's playing the long game, right? Anytime you try to get that instant gratification, it's almost like, it's always a risk. I think you've probably recognized as well. Once you reach a certain level of strength, continuous progression, it's almost like you're always taking some chance of risk. There's some risk, like when you're trying to push those sets, at least in strength, because a lot of my training is done under 6 reps, like under 8 reps. So I'm trying to really get strong because I love that type of training. I know it's not optimal for hypertrophy. I usually do a lot of back off sets to compensate with the volume. But when you're trying to get strong, it's not ideal when you're traveling. It's not ideal. Like you're best in my current environment where I'm familiar with the plates, I'm familiar with the barbells, like I'm familiar with the gym, I'm familiar with the schedule. That's when I kind of zone in and I can get that extra rep that I'm fighting for. But when I'm moving around, it usually takes a week or 2 to get even minimum to get settled into a new gym where I can actually express my strength to the maximum and try to, make some progress. So it's been a very humbling journey, man. Like I don't think I'm genetically the most blessed person out there. So like the number that I put out, I'm very proud of, but it takes quite a lot to improve from here.
That makes a lot of sense, especially that kind of for strength, because it's such a skill-based element to express it versus like when you're doing higher rep work, it's more of a like mental and just you physically prepared for it, whereas the skill component isn't quite as vital for that, which makes sense. And also it's funny talking through that where you're kind of talking through various scenarios of I've flown, and so I kind of have renewed expectations of what my leg training is going to be like in the gym. I'm not just going to expect myself to be amazing, but I'm also not going to go in there and not train or skip it because I had a fight. Like I'm still going to go in and do the work. I'm just being rational about it. It makes me think about comp prep, especially towards the tail end, where inevitably you're going to lose some performance because you're a much smaller human, you're glycogen depleted, you're just stressed. So performance can definitely drop off, but it's just recognizing it's nothing to be kind of scared about, worried about, and certainly don't go into the gym like people do in a cut. They're like, oh, I'm going to lose strength. Like, especially at the start of a cut, don't go in with those expectations because you're kind of setting yourself up for failure. But if it happens, recognize there's rational reasons for it. It's not because you screwed up or something's really wrong. Just make the appropriate adjustments, like you said, and then step forward. So if that is, I just need another night of good sleep and then I'll be back and having good training. Cool. Or I don't know, I need a refeed here to set myself up so I don't see these performance drops or whatever it might be. It might just be that you need to reset your expectations of load on the bar and just like, hey, I'm a weaker individual now. Let's work with this new load. Maybe my Wilks, I always come back to Wilks, hasn't come down. My strength to kind of weight ratio is in a fine place. Fair, So I think that's a great way to go about it, because, yeah, it's avoiding those extremes of just like complete ignorance. Like you said, that kind of led to some injuries where you were kind of overzealous. I've certainly been there myself too. Sometimes get there as too often for my liking, but also avoid fragility where you're just like, hey, I've had a bad night's sleep. Let's skip the gym today, because if you keep doing that, you're not going to get anywhere quick.
Yeah, the black and white thinking, man, that's my biggest nemesis that I was working toward for multiple years, and even to this day, and not just in fitness and everything. It's this dichotomous thinking of, I'm going to have a perfect workout, I'm not going to do it at all. And it's not just me, and not just, it's most people, and even you see a lot of pro athletes, they're going to, if I'm not at the top of the sport, I'm not going to do the sport at all, right? It's just once they retire, they just drop off and suddenly gain 60 pounds and get super overweight and unhealthy and spend half their day in KFC. I mean, that's kind of where you see people drop off because of that all or nothing mindset. It just sets up a really false worldview. And I think the cure for me was really kind of understanding this is a journey of continuous improvement and mastery. So as long as I'm trying, my best will vary throughout the time. So as long as I'm kind of at least equating it by a level of effort, that's okay. Like as long as the effort is there, at least that's one component, even with clients as well. I always just go back to that. Is the effort there? As long as the effort is there, that's all I'm really asking. I don't care about the outcome, because the outcome is not directly under your control, but the level of effort is. So just give me the effort and the outcome is going to come. And that's sort of the mentality that, I think that more you're, you have to be results focused to some extent in any sport, even in this one, you got to look at the result, but the less you can focus on it and more in the process, I think the better off just mentality, and you're going to have a shield against those bad days in terms of your psychology.
So well said. I think that links into this Instagram caption that I'm going to quote you on, and I'd love to hear you expand on it, because I read it and I was just like, this is gold, so I need to talk about it on the podcast. It was, take daily morning walks until a day without a walk feels weird. Eat healthy diet until an unhealthy diet feels like you're missing something. Go to the gym consistently until it feels strange not to go. The reality is no one knows how much time you need to get there. Could be months, could be years. Then again, there is no competition for who will form a healthy lifestyle faster, so it doesn't even matter. Go at your own pace and keep going until you can't imagine your life without it.
Yeah. That's one of those, I think, that encompasses almost like my entire philosophy when it comes to fitness, because I'm very much focused on lasting identity change. But most of the work that content I put out and clients work that I do, I'm really trying to put people at a pace or that's suitable for them to eventually get to a point where maybe me and you are, where not going to the gym requires discipline rather than going to the gym, where it's just so natural to you that it's a part of personal hygiene, where you're taking care of yourself, you're taking showers, you're brushing your teeth, you're going to the gym. It's almost like a no-brainer. It's just who you are as a person. So it's a non-negotiable thing anymore, and you're going to start organizing your life around it to make it happen. I think that's a very powerful mentality. And I don't, again, have a quantifiable way to tell you how long it's going to take you to get there. I know, habit research says 21 days, and they're going to pull out numbers like 66 days. And then you look at the paper and it says, okay, anywhere between 8 and 200, 60 days took this person to get to this habit. So there's really no way to quantify, because we all have different starting points and whatnot. But I think the goal of making this a part of who you are, to be at ease, to be a part of your me domain, like lifting, educating yourself about nutrition, being the type of person that's eating healthy. I think that's the end goal, and it should be the end goal for most people. And it's hard to get there, obviously. Like, it's not going to happen immediately. Initially, you're going to have to use a lot of motivation and willpower to get stuff done. Initially, you have maybe a wave of motivation at maybe January and whatnot. You make a decision and you ride the wave a little bit. Motivation goes down. You have to use some willpower to get back that motivation up to a point where you can still execute. But even at that level, you have to keep executing long enough and educating yourself enough to raise your level of competence, where now, as you're familiar with things, you require less motivation to keep executing, because competence is critical, as why people who just download meal plans or just go brain dead in the gym and just try to do stuff never really succeed, is because they don't have a level of invested competence in it. Like, you have to keep improving at it to a point where it's familiar, you're comfortable with it, and you're kind of good at it to some extent. And then suddenly, because you're good at it, you want to keep doing it. Eventually it becomes a habit. Eventually a habit will turn into an identity if you do it long enough. So there's sort of levels of change that you have to go through. most, I would say, failure occurs in that first stage where people are not able to translate motivation into discipline and into habit. That's sort of like the initial stage of January where people drop off by the time February hits. Like my gym is probably like half empty in about March. I'm sure you see the same things across the world. But then the other point of failure is kind of people that they go to a level of their discipline now and they're doing it, and then they finally realize that this actually will take much longer than I initially expected. And then they're also realizing that it's a lot of just boring fundamental stuff repeated over and over and over again, because there's almost like nothing quote unquote new. There's new stuff, but you got to go deep into it. And then they get discouraged and then they also drop off. So there's almost like points of failure across the journey. I always thought, like, for me personally, I was really good at avoiding those points of failure, because once I commit to something, I guess I'm like, I'm going to do it for a year and see what happens. And that was enough for me to bridge that gap. But yeah, like a lot of people have this illusion of 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. It's very little things happen in 30, to 90 days. Like, it's just, unfortunately, I mean, your goal should be to make this a lifestyle and who you are, rather than your goal being to lose X amount of pounds. Because if you're making it a lifestyle, like, you're going to eventually reach any goals you want, right? The goals can be just whatever you want once you actually have the skills and the habits. So I think a skill-based mindset is very valuable here when it comes to this type of identity building that we're talking about. Because all people, like, I mean, if you're talking to a fit person, they're really excited about to talk to you about what happened in the gym. They're excited about talking about their diet. They're excited about talking to you about, their walks, their routine, their productivity, how to go to bed. They're excited about this stuff because stuff is cool. Like, you're having fun with it. It's who you are. Talk to an overweight person, like, they're not comfortable with discussing any of this stuff. Like, they just don't know much. They're not involved in much in it. But if you kind of go through that process, I think it's so valuable. Like, and if you take the overweight person, you made them fit tomorrow, like, they would just revert back to where they were before. They wouldn't be able to keep it without the skills and habits. So the result itself is almost irrelevant if you're not gaining the mentality and the skill set along the way.
It makes me think of a discussion I recently had on the podcast about Ozempic and the GLP-1 agonists, where it's just like, hey, you can take this, you can lose loads of weight, but as soon as you're off it, if you haven't got the skills and habits in place to maintain that weight loss, it will just come back. And I mean, that's just dieting in general, where people just go on these crash diets that aren't sustainable for them. They don't understand why it works. And then they go back to their old eating, old habits, and they just put it all back on. And so I love this framing that you put here. Like you said, it's not going to happen immediately. It can differ person to person, but keep working on building an identity of like a fit and healthy person. I think sometimes when someone asks me, I don't know, they might ask me, or you, Mario, like, how do you eat? How do you train? And like, what's your like stress management or like sleep like behaviors like? And you walk them through everything that you do to set yourself up for success. And they probably look at you like a crazy person. Whereas we just do so many things in our day that we don't even realize we're necessarily doing it anymore. It's just part of who we are. But I've had clients where I actually just had it this morning, where he was like, I used to identify as someone who just had bad sleep and I was a poor sleeper. But since I actually prioritized it, put effort towards it for extended period of time, I'm sleeping so well. My training's going so much better. I feel better. I was just like, that's awesome, because he's someone who he just put that on himself. And I think many people label themselves as, I don't know, lazy or whatever it might be. But I think that almost like the way you think really influences how you are. So if you think of yourself as a healthy person, you're probably going to make more healthy decisions just generally. So I think your whole like identifying as this person is really cool, and it actually aligns really nicely with the whole chat of natural bodybuilding. It's a slow process. Enjoy the ride. Find ways to make it adherable and enjoyable along the way. So yeah, I think that philosophy that you hold is one of wisdom for sure.
Yeah, and I think that for us, I mean, one of our responsibilities, and I always felt mine, was to give people the correct expectations and what it really requires and how long it takes, because the year just flies by really quickly. I'm pretty sure that the older people get, they start realizing just how fast time flies. So look, a year from now, you can be in a place that is a healthier place with a healthier physique, and you can do a lot in a year. You can do crazy amounts of results in a year, and people underestimate how quickly that year is going to fly by. I see it time after time. I mean, you run programs that are like 6 months, 4 months, 1 year. People are usually shocked at the end of a year, like how quickly it went, and also how much they managed to get done. Initially, if they had the conversation with themselves, they wouldn't even believe it. Like, just because kind of you don't have this perception of time. Like things feel like, oh, it's going to be 3 months. Oh, it's going to be 4 months. No, man, like a year is nothing. Like a year is a joke. And you're not even, honestly, like 10 years from now, you're not going to remember how long it took you to get lean or how long it took you to establish a habit and whatnot. You're just going to forget it. Like I don't remember how long it took me. And I'm doing this for a living. Like I just kind of kept doing it. So yeah, I think time is such a valuable, it's like an amplifier of everything. Like if you're on the right path, time is going to amplify your results. If you're on the wrong path, time is going to just make things worse. If if you had a burger and fries, you got a heart attack immediately, nobody would ever be eating burger and fries. But because it takes 30 years of those types of eating behaviors to manifest in a negative outcome, that's what screws people over. The same thing is with this that we're talking about. In a way, like you have to do certain things, but you eventually learn to love what you have to do in a way. Like it just feels nice. And I think that's that's the end game. Once you enjoy the process, like it's inevitable. Like, no matter how long it takes. Like I've seen people blow up in a year or two with their physiques, with newbie gains to 3 years, maybe 4. They're really reaching a great level. I've also seen people kind of being a slow starter and eventually kind of compounding to an incredible physique like 10 years later. You don't know where you're going to be until you try it. And I've also seen people kind of plateau and then suddenly get into more of like evidence-based fitness, maybe try to find certain ideas, and suddenly it works for them. They just improve their physique dramatically because maybe half their body was still not even, developed to a point of intermediate, even though they've been in the gym for 8 years. So yeah, I think it's just a fantastic journey if you can, because one thing in fitness that's cool is you can pretty much control a lot of the actions, like, and you can control like what you do. In business and other things, you have to involve a lot of people. Like, and it's just in fitness, it's an individual sport, so you have a lot of responsibility and influence over the actual outcome. It's kind of like a cool way to build confidence. And yeah, it's just for me, it's been a game changer. I used to play soccer when I was a kid, and actually, the reason why I went out of shape was when I went to college, I lost my team. Like, I couldn't play in college; there was no team, and those 5 years destroyed my health dramatically. But before that, it's a team sport. So you play when other people play. If they don't play, you don't play. And with fitness, it's kind of cool. You can always get a workout done at home, in a hotel, in a gym, anywhere. Like you can get something done that's going to level you up, at least mentally. You're going to get to bed that day feeling better about yourself. And I think that's, it's just an incredible journey. So yeah, I'm a big proponent of just kind of looking at it from that perspective, not just necessarily of like who's the most jacked or who has the biggest biceps, because that's all going to fade away for all of us eventually. Like we're all going to just be smaller and weaker versions of ourselves. But at some point, like it's just, we're still going to do it, right? I would be lifting weights and doing this stuff even if I didn't grow a gram of muscle for the rest of my life. I would still do this, right? So just because I like it, I mean, it makes me feel great.
Yeah. Yeah, really, really nice. And I agree with everything you said there. And something I actually think that links into this quite nicely, again, was in one of your videos. You were talking about 3 reasons clients of yours often don't see results. And one of them was talking about this upside versus downside paradigm. So, and you talked about kind of rule number 1 with business is never to lose money. I'd love to hear you kind of talk through this and how people can apply this principle to what their journey is.
Yeah, it's kind of taking a lot of principles from investing, because in investing, like mostly what costs you are bad decisions more than you would gain from a great decision. Another great example would be tennis. Like most of amateur games are decided by the mistakes of your opponent or your mistakes rather than actually good plays from each side. And it's kind of the same in fitness when you're first starting. It's not necessarily that you have to be perfect with the actions that you do day to day. Like as long as you're in proximity of your macros and calories and you're getting some workouts in, even if they're not like maxed out, close to failure and all the perfect technique, you're still going to get results as long as you avoid going out on the weekends and having a 5,000 calorie binge, or having that binge then turn into 2-3 weeks off where you destroy a month of progress. I think that's kind of where you can play offense and defense on the journey, and playing sort of defense is almost more important than offense initially, because there after a certain point, like once you get, let's say 90% of your macros and close to that kind of level, you're now dealing with 10, 15, 20 gram differences. It's not going to make as much of an impact as it is if you just go out and just totally destroy your diet for like a week on a vacation and gain like 10 pounds. So I always try to convey to clients is that there's a limited upside, but there's almost like an unlimited downside if you go like crazy. because there's only so much you can improve after you've gotten, like, let's say 80% there, like 90% there. Like, your fat loss process is not going to be accelerated by that much if you cut 100 calories today. Whereas it's so much easier to eat, 2,000 calories extra today, and harder to cut 100 calories today. So it's just, it's just at a point that we have to learn how to play in both modes. I think protecting progress, or kind of a video game example, would be to hit save game, right? Create a lot of save game spots. Like, if you know there's something going to happen on the weekend, or a party or wedding or a vacation coming up, save game, right? Like, just don't lose progress. Don't do anything too crazy, and resume when you come afterwards, and you attack and attack and attack and make new progress. And I love that mentality. I think it really helps people understand that there's so much more that you lose just purely through making mistakes initially than you gain from doing good things. If that makes sense now a bit more.
Yeah, when I think about it, as an example that comes to mind is snacking. So, like, I don't know, have an extra biscuit here, have some full creamer within 4 of my coffees through the day, and like, I'll forget about all these little snacks, like little things that, like, they don't mean much, but I don't know, I was perfect with my diet on the weekend. I ate no, like, quote unquote dirty food, whatever it is. It's like, you're really not going to gain that much from that, but all these little mistakes through the week, they're going to really, really start harming you. Or it's that person who's, I don't know, I'm going to train 6 times per week, and I'm going to dedicate, and they can do it for 2 weeks. But then, like, 2 weeks later, they don't get to the gym at all. That's going to harm them much more if they just hit 3 times a week for, like, the next few months. They're going to see much better progress. So I totally understand where you're coming from with that. And it kind of makes me think of, like, low-hanging fruit. A lot of people, they look at, like, the shiny bullets of things that are gonna, I don't know, they look at, like, an Andrew Huberman, and he says, oh, don't drink coffee within the first hour or 2, or whatever it is, of waking up, and they're, like, doing that. But it's like, are you even getting to bed on time, like, to give yourself 8 hours of sleep that you probably should be getting? So it's kind of like they're focusing on the little shiny details that ultimately don't drive much progress. But it's exactly as you said, it's kind of that law of Pareto, where it's like that 20% that provides the 80% of results, and then you've got 80% to get that last tiny 20%. So don't focus too much on that. Really nail this 20% and then slowly gain from there.
Yeah, people are very quick to dismiss things like just being on point with your calories and macros, because a lot of people have very surface level understanding of many concepts that we're talking about. You mentioned calorie tracking, progressive overload, going to the gym, certain lifts. People have familiarity, but they confuse familiarity with mastery. Like, one thing is, I mean, there's both the competitive bodybuilder has to hit their macros, and you have to hit your macros. So that, they're getting insane results, and you say hitting your macros doesn't work for you, right? Like, that's sort of the mentality that people are coming from, where I tried macro counting, it doesn't work. I tried this, doesn't work. Where it's, are you actually mastering that concept? Because that's really how every domain has its fundamental principles that drive progress, and the rest is sort of icing on the cake. And for us, it's clearly that we have to be on point with training effort, with this amount of volume, understand good technique, understand that you have to be having intent to progress over time, macro calorie intake, good quality diet, good fundamentals around sleep, and overall organizing your day around, trying to reduce stress and whatnot. So there are certain principles that, if you get really good at those principles, you can almost like ignore everything else. Like, you're still going to get insanely amazing results compared to, people will often ask, hey, what if I combine a hot sauna after the workout? Does that enhance my hypertrophy? Because, I know cold will potentially diminish my hypertrophy if I stay in an ice bath. But what if I do a hot sauna? I listened to this podcast, and I went on, this blog, and I read, man, like, is your bench, for 10 better this year than it was last year?
Yeah.
Can you do more for 10 this year than last year? That's all I care about. And let's first see that, and then let's talk about hot saunas, yogas, and all the, gadgets for recovery and whatnot. Because at the end of the day, it's like, are you getting stronger in a moderate rep range over time? You want hypertrophy? If you're not doing that, like, all else just you can throw out the window. I mean, it's probably not as simplistic as that, but are you really, across your entire physique, you pick, say, a couple of benchmark lifts, moderate rep range, like 8 to 12. Can you do more this year than you did like 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago? If you can, you're doing something right. If you cannot, something's probably off with your programming, like where you're training or your general approach, right? I don't know if that's too simplistic, but I try to always explain things in a way that will work for the vast majority of people out there analyzing their own training performance. And I mean, you cannot make it simpler than that.
No, I definitely agree. It's like getting the cart before the horse in that sense, where it's like they're focusing on these tiny things that really don't make that much difference probably, and they don't have the basics in place. And I really completely agree. I think I did a post on it recently where I was just like, if you aren't getting stronger for like the moderate rep range on your big compound lifts that you're doing over time, like it doesn't matter how like your question of am I doing enough volume, or like should I be doing high reps or low reps or whatever it is, it's like you're clearly doing some of the real basics wrong if you aren't getting stronger over time. If your goal is hypertrophy, it's like, are you actually eating enough to fuel your workouts now, or are you in a kind of calorie deficit just permanently, and that's sacrificing any kind of gains you could be making? So yeah, I think this discussion has been great, Mario. I really like your philosophy, the way you talk through subjects, and I think you really help people who are struggling maybe at the start of their journey really level up, but you also remind those who are within it to kind of never forget the basics. And I really appreciate that about you. And so thank you very much for this chat. It's been a great one. And if people want to keep up to date with you, I know on YouTube, you're getting close to 500,000 subscribers over there. So that's awesome work. But where else should they head?
Yeah, I've been posting. YouTube is my main thing. I posted a little bit more on Twitter recently, or an X, or whatever you want to call it. I share some stuff on Instagram, probably not as much as I should based on all the marketing people that I know to keep pushing it. But YouTube would be probably the best place. And just some thoughts I put out on these like common platforms, like even Facebook a little bit, more like personal account. But YouTube would be the main one if someone wants to go a bit deeper into some of these concepts. There's quite a lot of videos there in the library, which it's also a legacy project. So hopefully people will get a lot out of that.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much, Mario. I'll make sure that's linked in the description, and we'll catch you next time. Cheers, guys.
Thank you, Steve. Cheers.
Losing weight fast while maintaining muscle mass. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? It isn't though. It's reality, and we know how to do it, and we will help you achieve this. The Minicut Movement is an 8-week fat loss program to make you lose a huge chunk of fat while maintaining muscle mass at the same time. We will support you from the beginning to the end so that you see the results you would like to and come out of it much stronger. You'll receive a fully automated spreadsheet that is based on your nutritional needs. You can choose between 6 different male and female training templates. Over 30 videos will guide you through each and every single step of the Minicut so that you're getting the most out of your journey and that you always know what to do. But the best thing is that you can start whenever you want. The Minicut Movement is open 24/7. So if you want to learn more or you're ready to sign up, hit the link in the description below. So let's revive stronger together.